Welcome today to Amer. He's our speaker on our Unit Masters program. He's helping to lead a really amazing project called ChainSafe. They're building basically the infrastructure for the new decentralized internet. They power some of the most impressive projects in the space, like Ethereum, Filecoin, Polkadot, Cosmos, which are super instrumental pieces of technology which powered this revolutionary blockchain technology, which is going to transform the world and is transforming the world as we speak. So looking forward to hear Amir's thoughts and insights, and we'll get, questions for him. So please put your hands together for Amir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. First of all, yeah, it's really awesome to be here, and I didn't expect people to be from so many different places around the world, and that's just like super cool and really awesome to see people coming together to just learn and all that. And to be honest, like it's kind of surreal to even be considered a mentor at this point, and I'm really grateful for that, and to be here and share my story. And my goal with being here today and just like sharing my journey into blockchain, and also my vision for how I see blockchain impacting the world is really to hopefully inspire you. Because yeah, not that long ago, I was sort of on the outside looking in, trying to figure out, what do I want to do with my life, and how do I want to have an impact on the world. And it's been quite an awesome journey to get to this point, and now to be sharing that with people to hopefully help you go on your own journey. And so, Michael gave like a great introduction. I'm a VP at ChainSafe, and as he mentioned, we are a blockchain research and development firm. I joined as an early employee about 2.5 years ago, and at the time, I had no experience working as a PM or working in blockchain. So it's been like an incredible journey to get to this point. And at that time, when I had joined, there was about 10 of us. We were based in Toronto. And yeah, nobody really had much experience. A lot of people had actually just dropped out of school. We had one local client that was keeping us afloat, nobody that you would have heard of. And so we've sort of been building the plane while flying, so to speak. We've now grown to a remote organization with 50 people all over the world, working across, as Michael mentioned, many of the major blockchain ecosystems. And I think that's what really makes us different from a lot of other blockchain companies. Most organizations focus on just one project or one platform. But I'm proud to say that we're blockchain agnostic, and we contribute to major ecosystems like Ethereum, Filecoin, Polkadot, Cosmos, and more. And we've also started to build our own products now. So we have something called ChainBridge, which is a general purpose bridge, a piece of infrastructure that can be used to connect different blockchains, such as the ones that I just mentioned, as well as we have a proof of concept, which is called ChainSafe Files. And like the simplest way I can explain it is it's kind of like a decentralized Dropbox. So it's built on top of Filecoin, and you can check that out straight from our website. And like just that journey from joining ChainSafe, 2.5 years ago, with little experience and basically not much exposure to blockchain to this point has been an incredible journey of growth and self-development. And so I want to share a little bit more about my journey and what's even inspired me to go on it. And so ironically, I actually worked at banks for the majority of my career, because yeah, right now I think I'd rather see blockchains kind of take over in that aspect a little bit more, at least. But yeah, I was never really happy or engaged working there. I was pretty comfortable, which is why I think it did it for 7 years or so. Because life begins outside of your comfort zone, and I think that's certainly true for me. So, 4 years ago, roughly, almost to the day, actually, I would say I hit my personal rock bottom. At that time, I was in a, long-term relationship that I thought was going to last for the rest of my life, and I was in this job where, you know, I'd been doing it for many years, and I thought that this is just how it was going to be. And yeah, around 4 years ago, that relationship ended suddenly and traumatically, I would say. And, you know, 6 days later, I actually got laid off from my job. So in the span of a week, I went from, you know, sort of having everything somewhat figured out to basically, you know, not really having much um, figured out in that sense. And so, you know, I was about 30 at the time, and I felt like I hadn't achieved much. And for someone who was always like the smart kid in school, this was a huge shock, just cut out for a typical success in society. And like, to yeah, be perfectly frank, I was quite lost, and my confidence was definitely at an all-time low. Um, Fortunately, though, I was able to take some time off at that point to do some healing and self-reflection. I spent the rest of the year traveling, sort of like my own version of Eat, Pray, Love. Although I haven't seen the movie, I did a bunch of solo travel. I went to plant medicine healing center in Peru. I did 10 days meditation retreat, climbed a mountain process. Like, I had an opportunity to really reflect and think about what I wanted. And I was also fortunate to have friends who shared their vision for blockchain with me. Prior to that, you know, I really just saw it as an investment. Um, but their vision inspired me to dig deeper during this time. And, you know, I've been refining my vision for what blockchain is and how it will impact the world ever since. And I'll share with you my current thoughts later in this talk. But I actually started going to a lot of meetups. I noticed people dreamed of actually solving them. Um, and what was really cool was I realized that people in the blockchain industry actually shared very similar values to me. And that's when I basically decided, hey, sorry about that. I think my internet cut out. You can hear me now? Sweet. Um, I'm not too sure where I cut out, but basically I was towards the end of my trip, and I just dedicated some time to learning about blockchain, which was uh, you know, really fruitful. And I came back to Toronto and started working on a project with a friend, and just like continued learning. And while this project didn't really go as expected, you know, it failed, so to speak. But I thought it was a really important part of my journey because it allowed me to continue learning and meet people along the way. And among those people, I met Aiden and Stu, two of the co-founders of ChainSafe. Um, and, you know, I'm sure a lot of you have done a lot of networking, and sometimes you meet people and it's just like, you know, not much of a connection. But when I met Aiden and Stu, it was like we had known each other forever. And so, you know, we stayed in touch. I would go by the office every now and then. And they reached out to me a few months later, um, asking, hey, do you want to be a PM? Like, we need somebody where we to actually do this role. They had never had a PM. Um, and, you know, I didn't really hesitate, even though I had no experience doing this job or, you know, working in blockchain like professionally. Um, and the reason was I knew I would enjoy working with them every day. And I think that was a really important insight that I had during this whole transition, was that in the past, like, I was really like optimizing decisions around like some future version of myself or some future ideal. Whereas like once I started working here, I was just happy doing what I was doing every single day. And I think that really paved the way for me to be more engaged and more passionate about what I'm doing and have a bigger impact. And so here I am, 2.5 years later, and you know, the organization's grown a lot. Now I'm leading a team of PMs. There's 5 of us now, so it's been an incredible journey to get to this point. And I would say, um, like, a huge part of what keeps me going every single day and you know, inspires me to work hard is the vision that was sort of shared with me when I first started this transition, and that really is like a world that we'll see in the future because of this new technology. And you know, a lot of people ask me about blockchain. I'm sure a lot of people talk about it nowadays in general, and I think it can mean a lot of things to different things to different people, right? One person might talk about sound money for days and days and days or years even. Other people may talk about censorship resistance. Some others might talk about decentralization, new forms of government, privacy, and none of those people would be wrong, right? Like blockchain has applications in all of these sort of areas. But I've been thinking more and more about like, what is the common thread between all of these different ideas? Like, what is sort of, if we zoom out and look at blockchain holistically, what is it? And at least the way I explain it now is that our interactions with society are basically through a series of man-made systems, or in other words, like the way we interface with one another or with society are through these systems that have been made by like people just like us. And so these systems are things like money, the economy that is built on this money, financial systems that we've created, governments, right, laws, and the judicial system, and just like technology as a whole, whether it's the hardware that we use or these platforms that we use to connect with one another. These are all just a series of man-made systems. But the thing is that over time, these systems have evolved in such a way that they don't necessarily serve everyone equally. Whether we're talking about money or the economy, our governments and laws, technology, unfortunately, there exists a privileged minority that benefits a lot more from these systems. And I don't think most people would argue with that. I think we kind of all see that at this point. But I think the worst part is that we're very dependent on these systems. We can't really opt out of these systems very easily. It's really hard not to use money, or it's really hard not to use technology if you want to survive in this world. And so this has put us in a pretty precarious situation. And so the way that I see it is like the ethos of this entire industry, the common thread that connects all of those different things that we talked about, like sound money, like decentralization, new governance. The ethos of this industry is to actually use advancements in technology that we've seen over the last few decades to create alternatives to these systems that actually serve all of humanity equally. So I'll say that again. The way I see it is the ethos of this industry is to use advancements in technology to create alternatives to these systems to serve all of humanity equally. And so, I think when we talk about sound money or, privacy or censorship resistance, building these things into the system, making them a property of the system, allows everybody to be like equal on that system, which is like a huge change from these man-made systems that we've been using for centuries. And so why does this all matter, right? Like, so what? Maybe most people think that things are not too bad the way they are. So who really cares, right? And so like, yes, there is certain things I hope to see as these systems become more used, as these alternatives exist and more people subscribe to them. And there's two main things I'd like to share today that really inspire me. One is inequality being reduced, and another one is a more engaged society. And so I'll start with inequality. So, we live in a world with massive inequality, both within societies and between societies. And in both cases, the gap between the haves and the have-nots is growing at like an increasing rate. It's not just that it feels wrong. Data shows that inequality is seriously harming us. It's kind of like a cancer. At first, it's invisible, but slowly the signs start appearing until eventually it's impossible to ignore. And some of these signs are that life expectancy is worse when there's higher inequality. There's more mental illness, more addictions, more infant mortality rates, teenage birth rates. Kids' math and literacy scores are worse. There's just so many more indicators that are significantly worse in societies with higher levels of inequality. And the statistics, are eye-opening. And there's just no question that we all suffer more when societies are more unequal. And, I first kind of tuned into this situation, this crisis, I would say, watching a TED talk given by someone named Richard Wilkinson, who has spent decades researching this phenomenon. And I highly recommend it if you want to hear more about it or dig in more. I think he has a book as well. But it really highlights like why inequality is such a huge problem. And so, the hope is that when we build these new systems using blockchain as like the fundamental layer and build in um, sort of like fairness into the system as a property of the system itself and give people options, right? Rather than being automatically opted in, you have the choice of picking which system suits you the best. I imagine that over time we'll see inequality be reduced because people are not participating in these systems that they're inherently disadvantaged in. So, so yeah, given how negative inequality is, like this would be a huge positive for the world and something that really inspires me to continue working on blockchain every single day. And then the second thing that really inspires me is a more engaged society. And to explain what I mean by this, I think it's helpful to maybe look at a more recent transformation in media that we've seen over the last couple of decades, and then think about like the patterns that we see there and how that may happen on a larger scale. And so we've seen an incredible change in the last few decades on the internet. We've gone from having just a handful of media corporations to an explosion of individual content creators. And it's actually quite incredible to see platforms like YouTube, Instagram, Substack, and so many more are really empowering individuals. Uh, we were all consumers in the past, and so many people now have become creators. And people are expressing their creativity and actually having a meaningful impact on the world now. And so much so that it's actually become hard for the big media companies to compete. More and more attention and revenue is going to engaged individuals. And as a result, more and more individuals are noticing this pattern and taking initiative and becoming engaged. And it's this positive feedback cycle. And the way I see it, it's really just the beginning. And over the next few decades, I imagine this pattern to grow exponentially. Um, and so the reason I share this with you is I think we'll see similar effects on a much wider scale as time goes on and as blockchain becomes more established. And so if we zoom out and look at like sort of like history on a larger scale, we've gone from societies where the individual doesn't have a voice. So things like kingdoms and monarchies and other societal structures that have existed in the past to ones where everyone gets a vote, even if it's only once every 4 years. We've come a long way. And as a result, we see so many more people engaged in affecting change and being involved in decision making. Many people actually dedicate their lives to this. And this change has been revolutionary. In fact, America was founded on these principles. And I believe that blockchain will actually empower individuals to become more engaged citizens of their communities. And yeah, while we may think we've come a long way from the days of being in a kingdom, in my opinion, we've only scratched the surface. Blockchain will really be a catalyst for everyone to become a change maker. And I think at Unit Masters, they call this the token economy. And, instead of people being apathetic or disillusioned, complaining about problems, I hope to see people will feel more empowered to solve them. And not only will they be empowered, they'll be incentivized to solve them. And so, like we've seen with media, eventually the incumbent organizations, the institutions, the gatekeepers, they just simply will not be able to compete with the engaged individual. And so, I hope that together we can co-create a better world than any one person, one organization, or one institution could ever dream of. And so, my final words really are, as inspiring and as beautiful as this vision may be, there's no guarantee that we will achieve it. There's a lot of work to be done, and we need as much help as we can get along the way. And that's why I share my story and my vision. If you're on the sidelines and still, sort of figuring out how to participate, just dive right in. And I hope my story demonstrates that really anybody can have an impact. You just have to start somewhere. Um, and yeah, that's pretty much it. That's what I had to share, and happy to chat more.
Amazing. Thanks so much for sharing that, Amir. It's, yeah, super inspiring, super insightful. Like, excited to hear more of your thoughts. Like, how can, the people listening in on our call today and part of the master's program sort of take away from this and go like, okay, this is what I should do as the next step. This what does the future look like, and how can they kind of prepare or use some of the things that are emerging, that whether it's technology or societal behavior to kind of sort of yeah, be prepared or leverage.
Totally. Um, I don't think there's like a one size fits all solution that I can recommend, but I think what generally works is, one is learn. Just learn as much as you can about what's happening. Be curious. Um, that's really what helped me, because I think it's a very much a positive feedback cycle. The more you learn, the more inspired you get, and then the more inspired you are to learn, and so on and so forth. So just like dive in, and there's so many avenues within blockchain or this whole movement in general that you can learn about, that everyone can find something that sort of appeals to them. Whether you're interested in, say, like sound money, censorship resistance, privacy, whatever it is, there's just so many avenues that I think anybody can find something they're really passionate about. And along with learning, I think it's also really important to get involved in these communities. Blockchains, um, and are very much like community driven, given that there is no owner of these systems. The development of all of these systems are done by the community themselves, and so the communities around blockchains are very rich. And unfortunately right now it's COVID, so it's a bit harder to get together in person. But obviously there's virtual events like this one, and in general they're happening all over the internet. But obviously, once things open up again and you're able to even attend in person, I would highly recommend it. I think like actually attending these meetups or gatherings, and hearing what other people, how they saw the world or what they were working on, was probably one of the most beneficial things that, for me at least on my journey, in order to help me understand the space more, to help me actually learn and be more inspired. And so, yeah, I would say those two things: just learning as much as you can, because there is no course really you can take, or that at least one that can keep up with things because they move so fast. Um, and just get involved in communities, because that's how you'll find interesting people to share ideas with, and even work with.
Amazing. And love to learn more, like if you can kind of explain like what ChainSafe focuses on, like what's the future of ChainSafe? How does it play like a role in this, entire ecosystem? And then you mentioned a few projects like, Filecoin or Polkadot or Cosmos or Ethereum. Like what are all these things? And, for someone who's very new to the space, like how can they sort of understand all these different concepts and how they all fit together?
Of course, yeah. So um, ChainSafe, for the last couple of years, I would say, has primarily been working with like foundations that have been set up to um, help these networks become successful. And so there's like the Ethereum Foundation that supports Ethereum. There's the Web3 Foundation that supports Polkadot. There's the newly formed Filecoin Foundation, actually, that supports Filecoin, so on and so forth. So these foundations actually have been coming to us because of our sort of niche knowledge and expertise, to help build out that base layer infrastructure. So what we focus on is actually like writing the software that is used by, say, miners or validators or nodes on the network. So if, let's say, people wanted to run an Ethereum node, they could use our software for Ethereum 2.0. And so that's sort of our niche. And this is really like the base layer infrastructure. And to put things in perspective, the vast majority of people in the world will never interact with that software directly or run it. If you use a wallet, for example, on your phone, or a hardware wallet, or MetaMask, or whatever, for Ethereum, those pieces of software would actually interact with the software that we write. So we're kind of like one layer below. And so that's our niche, right? And we've been doing that for the last few years, and it's really helped us learn a lot about different blockchain ecosystems, the similar approaches they take and the different approaches they take. And that's allowed us to gain a lot of knowledge. And so more recently, our focus has also become to start taking our own ideas and putting them into action versus implementing the ideas of these foundations. And so we've started with 2 projects that I mentioned earlier, ChainBridge and ChainSafe Files, that basically help. We leverage our knowledge with these existing projects to make similar sort of infrastructure level products that will benefit the space. And our goal really is to help accelerate the development and the adoption of all of these Web3 technologies by leveraging the skills that we've developed over the last few years working on these technologies. And in terms of like the projects, I can give like a quick kind of high level overview for each of these projects. So Ethereum is probably one of the more well-known projects that we work on. And so it's essentially like a decentralized world computer. And so it's essentially like a platform where any developer can develop their application and deploy it there. And the benefit of this is that it's completely transparent and it can't be stopped. It's censorship resistant. So it's not like if somebody didn't like this software, they could say, hey, look, like, this is illegal, or this is something that I don't like you have to stop it. Once that code has been deployed, it will run no matter what. And that's why there's a really interesting book that if you're interested in Ethereum, I highly, highly recommend, called The Infinite Machine. I read it this past summer and I just could not put it down. And it's the story of Ethereum from the early days, like the idea, all the way to now. And it reads like a novel, so highly recommend it. And the reason it's called The Infinite Machine is because it just won't stop. Like no one can stop it, like not even the people who created it. And so that's, quite a novel concept. And I guess the other like aspect of that that's so powerful is that whatever is running is totally transparent. All the code is open source. Anyone can see it. And so it's like what you see is what you get. Like nothing will be changed on you. If you commit to doing something on Ethereum or commit to using a certain software, you know exactly how it's going to operate, which is very different from the software we use nowadays. And so that's basically Ethereum at a high level. Polkadot is maybe a good next thing to explain. So Polkadot builds on a lot of what Ethereum had done, and it was actually created by one of the co-founders of Ethereum, who took a lot of what he saw in Ethereum and where it could improve, and then created Polkadot. That's not to say that Polkadot is better than Ethereum. It's just something that's different and improved in certain aspects. And Ethereum right now, if you're familiar with it, faces a lot of issues around scalability. It's really expensive to do simple things, and which makes it like inaccessible for a lot of people. And then the other issue is because of the way it's set up, where every sort of user of this is using the same platform, same system. It's limited in what it could do. It's quite a general purpose machine. An analogy I like to use for this is like, imagine you were programming a robot to play soccer, right? With Ethereum, it would almost be like every single action would be like move your arm or move your leg, back 1 centimeter, move it back another centimeter, and like so on and so forth until you eventually kick a ball. Whereas on something like Polkadot, because they've made it such that rather than having one general purpose platform, people can build their individual specific platforms. Programming something like a robot on to play soccer on Polkadot might just be like, okay, kick a ball, and that's one action, right? And so, there's pros and cons to both. when you have the general purpose platform, anybody can build anything very easily, and that allows for a really rich ecosystem with like lots of different applications that can talk to each other very easily. Whereas Polkadot allows you to build very specific applications that will be much more performant and scalable, which gives you more options. There are things that are possible on Polkadot that just wouldn't be possible on Ethereum. And so that's essentially what Polkadot is. It's a similar idea to Ethereum where it's a platform, but rather than you know, being general purpose, each individual group or organization that wants to build a specific application would build the entire blockchain. And then all of those blockchains would be connected together by Polkadot as a whole. And so, so that's basically a high level summary of Polkadot. And for Filecoin, this one's a bit simpler because it's basically just decentralized file storage. So nowadays, you know, if you want to store your files or if applications want to have a backend where they store your data, it usually gets stored on centralized servers like, you know, Amazon Web Services, or, you know, you may use Dropbox or Google Drive. And while that works pretty well, there are some, you know, risks to having everything stored on systems that are owned by other people and centralized. So Filecoin is basically a network, a decentralized storage network. So it allows people like you and I to either store data for a fee, or if you're on the other end, you could actually provide storage and get paid for the storage you're providing. And the network basically navigates that entire sort of interaction, from like ensuring your files will be there, ensuring that you know, they're secure and all that. It basically, Filecoin is the protocol that ensures that that all happens effectively. And then the final, so Cosmos. So Cosmos is very similar to Polkadot. It's trying to solve a lot of the same problems with their own sort of approach. So I'd say, you know, the explanation I gave for Polkadot, it applies to Cosmos as well. It's just a different team that's working on it, that's taking a slightly different approach. And yeah, that's at a high level, I think, like our 4 major projects that we work on. And yeah, I see that there's a few questions here, but yeah, I'm happy to kind of go into more detail where it would be helpful.
One concept you mentioned was Web3. Like, what is like Web2? What's Web1, and what is like Web3? Like, how does it all fit in? Like, a great explanation.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think I may not get this perfectly right because but I'll explain it in the way that I see it. So Web1 was like this first generation internet that maybe many of us didn't even really use. That was very much just like data being transmitted one way outwards, right? So there wasn't much interaction. So it was just like, oh, okay, here, I'll post a web page, I'll write a blog, and that's it, right? There wasn't like much of a two-way interaction. Web 2 is once we started to have these like more applications, right? Which is what we're used to now. Like the vast majority of what we use right now is what people would be considering Web 2, which is, yeah, this dynamic internet with applications and all that. Web 3 tries to build on top of that, where it's not only these applications that we use, but there's also a layer of verification, right? So what you actually interact with on the web, you can verify is true, right? So the applications that you use, you know exactly what you're using. For example, a good example may be like a bank, right? So a bank in a Web 2 application, it's if they say that you have, say, $200 in your bank account or something, that's just the bank displaying what they have in their database to you. And while we have been able to trust this in the past, there's no actual guarantee that that money is actually in your bank account and yours, right? It's just a number in their database. Whereas in Web 3, the goal is to move from this system, these systems where we essentially trust the applications that we're using, And rather than trusting, we actually verify. So when you use something like Bitcoin, what the wallet is doing, and when it shows you, say you have $200 worth of Bitcoin, is it's actually checking on the Bitcoin blockchain and verifying that you have it. And so when you see it on the on the website, you actually know for sure that this exists there and that it's verified. And so that's really the transition from Web 2 to Web 3, is this idea of verifying what you're doing and how you're, and the applications you're using. And if you're interested in this concept more, there's a great talk by Juan Benet, who is the founder of Protocol Labs, the team that's built Filecoin, and it's called, I think, What is Web3? And it's a fantastic talk that basically goes into much more depth than I have in terms of like, what is Web 1, what is Web 2, what is Web 3, and how do we get there?
Amazing. We have a question here from Alex. May we please get an example of a project that is possible on Polkadot, but not on Ethereum?
Yeah, for sure. There's so many things. So one thing that's really tough to do on Ethereum right now is storage, right? It's really, really expensive to actually store anything on Ethereum. And like, maybe to give you some insight, like the way Ethereum works is you actually have to pay to use it. And the cost of using it is dependent on what you do, right? So simple things like, for example, me sending some Ethereum to you would be like a smaller cost, but then like doing things that are more complicated, for example, like maybe deploying some new software onto Ethereum, or storing something on the blockchain itself, is actually quite expensive. And storage is the most expensive thing to do on Ethereum. So much so that it's basically infeasible to store anything of meaningful size. And that makes sense, right? Like there's this world computer that we're all using. If everyone was just able to store massive amounts of data on there, it would just not be feasible for people to like download the whole thing and actually verify all the information. And so Polkadot, since you're building your own blockchain, allows you to basically make the fee system however you would like it to be, optimize it for your own application. So anything that requires a lot of storage could be done on Polkadot, but just not possible on Ethereum. So for example, like let's say you wanted to have like a photo backup application, and you could do that on Polkadot, but you just definitely would not be able to do that on Ethereum. Now, of course, Filecoin exists as well, and so that's like maybe not the best example, because you could use Ethereum and also use Filecoin to kind of bring that together. But if we're talking about just Ethereum and just Filecoin, something like with high storage requirements would be possible on Polkadot, but not on Filecoin. Not on Ethereum. Perhaps another example is anything that requires like a very, very high throughput. So like lots and lots of transactions is not really possible on Ethereum on at least the base layer. There are a lot of options now for extending the base layer in such a way that it makes it more scalable. But if we're just talking about the base layer, if you're restricted to just the base layer, things like, for example, like a trading application, right, that requires a lot of like let's say you're buying and selling stocks or crypto, that requires a lot of like different orders to be put on, like buy orders, sell orders, and just like a lot of people to interact with very low latency. That will not work well on Ethereum, at least on the base layer. And so something like that would work a lot better on Polkadot. So yeah, that's about it for, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds. So we have a few questions, and then we have to leave some time for a networking session at the end. We have a question from Lynn. Great talk, thank you. What are your fears and fails?
Yeah. So, what are my fears? That's a good one. I'm thinking about that all the time, I guess. I tried. What are my fears? I mean, like, I guess like my fears are less related to like blockchain or anything like that. Like if you're asking about my fears as a human being, I guess like my biggest fear is not making the most of my time here, or taking my life for granted. It's so easy to just kind of get into the day to day like routine and grind and just feel like you're here forever. And so I guess like my main fear is not taking advantage of the time that I have here. Um, and I'm not sure if that's what the question was or if it was more related to blockchain, but I'll leave it at that. And if you want to know my fears around blockchain, I'm happy to talk more about that. In terms of fails, I feel like I'm failing every day on some level. And I think my journey that I explained over the last couple of years helped me really get comfortable with failure, because once I felt like I had lost everything on some level and that like what more could go wrong and I still felt fine and everything was really okay, I realized that failure was actually a really, really um, beneficial part of the process and help, I've learned the most from when things haven't gone well. So I would say like in general, like I'm failing all the time, but like it's an important part of learning and growing.
Amazing. I guess a final question before like wrapping up. What's your dream or vision for the future, and what's your happiest moment, in your blockchain or personal journey so far? And thank you so much for your insights and thoughts. Yeah,
Yeah,
sharing.
for sure. Sorry, can you repeat that question, at least the first part of it?
Absolutely. So your dream or vision for the future, personally and for the blockchain space, and then your happiest moment so far, personally and for the blockchain space.
Yeah. So my dreams for the future really, I mean, and I think blockchain can play a role in this, is just like, especially during COVID, one thing I've realized is like one of the most important things, if not the most important thing for us as human beings, is just like human connection in general, right? And I'm fortunate to have like lots of great connections in my life, even through COVID. But I've really seen through my own personal experiences and through talking to others, like um, how I guess like detrimental like loneliness is or lack of connection is. And I think, you know, blockchain plays a role in connecting all of us in a much more healthy way. But in general, I really have like I dream for a world where we're all much more connected to one another. Um, and whether that's through my work in blockchain or otherwise, I'm a big proponent of active listening, because I think that's like a huge factor in connection, just like being able to understand one another. And I actually gave a talk on that at a conference we had for ChainSafe that you can look up on YouTube. Um, but that's my dream, is to see just like a more deeply connected world. Um, and I guess like that's also my vision. Kind of like two birds, one stone with that answer.
Amazing. And your happiest moment, I guess, to wrap it up, and we'll move on to the networking session for our master's program. Thank you.
Yeah, so many happy moments. I mean, I'm very fortunate for that. But I think like in general, some of my happiest moments have come when really having like deep experiences. So for example, like going to Burning Man and connecting with people and just like going through hardship there, and but still somehow being together and one with other people, it has been really meaningful, as well as like going to like a 10-day silent meditation retreat a couple times and just getting through those experiences. I found that my happiest moments have come when I've really pushed myself into like deeper experiences and seen what has come of it. So it's not necessarily been the most pleasurable, but definitely the most meaningful.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Amir. Super interesting and insightful and thoughtful.